Hey Ria, can you do the question, reflect the breakout questions for this one? Can you
Yep.
send it, broadcast it to everybody? Like, what's the term?
Yes. I couldn't find Jamar again. Oh, okay. Is it Jama?
Jamma. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, I put him in Rachel's group. Should I move him? Nah.
It's fine. Is Fatima by herself?
Yeah.
Let's put him in Fatima's group. I always like to pair her with somebody so she's not so she doesn't have so much anxiety.
Yeah, that's a really big group that she's into. Who's Ria Prasad? Who is it? What time did we start?
At 6:10.
No, like the breakout room.
At 7:05.
7:05. Okay.
I felt like this one was tighter too. I'm getting better. It took me 3 tries.
Should I have them assign someone to report back?
Yes. Ria, you should pop into one of the rooms and check them out. They feel like they give me a breath of life.
Okay, let me do that.
It'll give you the option. Just don't press end meeting for everyone. Press leave room, not leave meeting.
Oh God.
Don't press leave meeting. Don't press end meeting.
You're still co-host, right?
Yeah, I'll be host.
No, you aren't.
Okay. I mean, it's fine because the next section I don't really have a screen share anyway. But I believe in you. You're not gonna mess this up, Ria.
Oh my God, now the pressure is definitely on. Okay, let me pop into Matt's room. I did it. Oh.
How'd it sound?
Oh my gosh. Somebody told me that like when there's rooms filled with like white people in these breakout sessions, like no one will talk. And it's kind of true.
Is that what's happening right now? No one's talking?
I mean, it was like Rachel had to force them to kind of talk, and they were all like older white people. Maybe it was the question.
What are the questions?
What narratives and stories do you hear about that help prioritize?
Yes. Mm.
They're uncomfortable, which is the point.
Oh, I want to jump into that one. I'll be back.
Okay.
Ria, these conversations are so good.
Yay,
I'm
success.
quite proud of it. I really hope that we have a few more minutes to
We do have 5
the
minutes.
video again.
Okay, yeah. I will have it ready in advance.
It must be seen. It deserves to be seen, Ria. I was like so giddy too, because I was like, what? She got the music in there? Oh, shit.
Oh, did I have the music this morning?
No.
Oh, man. I'm glad I could do this in 2 days, though. Usually, like, by the way, Joe, just for you to know, like, usually to do something like this, it takes at least like a week, like, if you're really working.
And you did
Just
it in how long?
2 days. Wait, no, yeah, Monday, since Monday night.
Why do we
And
do this to ourselves, Ria?
because we just, like, it's like masochism. And I think you enjoy it, like, when you actually beat the odds.
Yeah. What is that? Ugh. That sounds like trauma talking. I need to check in with myself.
Okay. That might be true. But yeah, I agree. Never do something like this where there's like breakout sessions with more than like 50 people. Zoom cannot.
I think we need more technical backup. Plus, we need a system
Yeah.
where we can assign more than one host.
Yeah. I didn't know that like breakout rooms can only be controlled by one person.
Yeah, it's annoying. This ends at 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
7:20.
Yep.
So 7:20 goes. I'm gonna do like an 8-minute visualization exercise or less.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna do like a 12-minute discussion. And I'm really gonna ask you to help me see who I should be calling on.
And that would mean like people who like
Raise their hands.
okay, so we'll tell them to please raise your hand in the chat. I mean,
Yeah.
like when you ask the question, tell them to raise your hand and I'll unmute them.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I got my sections down to at least 10 minutes.
You did. I was like, how that segregation one was so fast and smooth that I didn't expect it, to be honest.
So we do these rehearsals. They tell me a lot. They tell me if I'm ready or not, and I knew I wasn't ready. All right, they should be getting back soon, yeah?
Yeah, the countdown is on.
And who are the group leaders again? Matt,
Paris.
Rachel, Paris, Sean, and Jamar, and Fatima?
Yep. That's like 6 people, right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 groups, though, right?
There's 5 groups, but like 6 people technically.
Yes, yes.
I wish we could do this in person.
You know, huh?
I missed that. Wow.
I know.
They're coming back.
Welcome back. Woo.
Hello.
Hey, are we all here?
Yeah, Dominic was sharing and we got cut off.
I know, there's never enough time. There's never enough time. All righty. Let's go to Jamar and Fatima's group. Do we have someone that's ready to report
That
back?
would be me.
Thank you.
So we talked about like the idea that's perpetuated that urban areas are crime filled, and that it's a matter of public safety to be tough on crime, that like there's police displacement in the prison pipeline, and then those things help contribute directly to creating these gated communities, and the idea that like to keep a community safe you need block watch. There's also this idea that like, especially in like primarily white communities, like if they see like a person of color walking around, they don't belong there. There's this narrative where you have to be like the model minority, and there's Black and brown people supporting white authority. There's this narrative people perpetuate where they need to censor like their own human rights and appeal to them particularly through the lens of economic benefit in order to appeal to the power that's there. There's also like this idea that you need to protect your property, particularly like with the ongoing protests. That's something that people are majorly concerned about instead of the actual protests, the content of them. And there's this idea that gentrification is all right because Arizona's kind of new, and so communities don't quite feel as rooted. And so it's harder to kind of come up with these arguments when you're in this like newer state.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Matt's group?
Yeah, that's me speaking for Matt's group. We also talked about the idea, the two main narratives we got into at the beginning was the idea of housing making decisions on housing based off of the crime rates, but at the same time, the types of what are the crimes in those neighborhoods. Is it a lot of things like loitering and graffiti and things like that? But those hearing that a neighborhood has high crime rates is a very quick way to get people to look at other neighborhoods. Also, the idea of housing based off of good schools and bad schools in the area, and recognizing that bad school is almost always synonymous with the idea of more Black and brown students in that school, or saying things like every student is on free and reduced lunch. That is also another way to qualify that school as usually being a bad school. We also talked about the idea that real estate developers are saying that they're building, these high-rise studio housing units because that's what the market is asking for, but that's not necessarily the right thing to do. And also, who is there? How can that be their market when the need is so great around the community where they're putting in these very expensive housing units? Also, we talked about the idea of real estate for tourism. I think we all threw up a little bit in our mouths when somebody mentioned the idea of cityscape being completely renovated for the next time that we get the Super Bowl. So a lot of things like the light rail being expanded, not to help the needs of the community, but because the Super Bowl is going to come back eventually. So those were kind of the main things that we touched on. And I think Matthew can fill me in if there's any that I left out there.
No, I think that was great, Julia. I just want to add, the idea of safe neighborhoods. We want to think safe for whom? Is it somebody that's, noise complaints because there are Black and brown teenagers that are too loud is very different from an area that has a lot of houseless folks or Black and brown community.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Julia. I want to be in that snow that you were in that picture. Let's go to Rachel's group.
Hi, I'm Megan. And so some of the things that we talked about, we kind of talked about two different questions. The first one was the narratives. So crime also came up a lot. The discussion around like the war on drugs and safety in neighborhoods and crime-free rules in multi-housing. So either preventing people who have been incarcerated or too many visits from police leads to eviction. So those rules. We talked a little bit about the school systems as well. And then revitalization is something that's seen as really positive, and in a lot of ways it can be seen as like a white savior volunteerism sort of thing to like go in and fix up neighborhoods. And so the idea of helplessness that comes with this. And then we also talked about the way that property owners are seen as more so than renters, and renters can be seen as transient and not invested in the community. So how that has an effect. We talked about resources, and not only like the specific resources that go into predominantly white neighborhoods, but also the idea of not in my backyard. So whether it's moving flight paths or adjusting industrial buildings and moving into certain areas. And then along with that, we also talked about the building of condos and certain things along the light rail and ASU expansion, as ASU is a predominantly white education system, and so how ASU's expansion has added to that. Also freeways and city malls. So who gets, I think the example was who gets the IKEA and what's the sale tax revenue that comes from that. I think that was everything. Go ahead and add in if you have anything additional.
Thank you, Megan. Let's go to Paris's group.
So that's me for our group. We talked about the idea that rising home prices lift all boats, which is objectively not true. We talked about the rise in school segregation through the increase in charter schools and the fact that schools are funded through property taxes, and the lack of desegregation funding that has been largely cut. The fact that community funds are allocated by community representatives that are almost never actually from the community. They're largely white, property owners outside of the community, and the fact that ideas like participatory budgeting can lead to the community actually making those decisions for themselves, and deciding that, hey, we don't need to spend money on policing. We have other ways that we can better keep ourselves safe. And the fact that neighborhood watch associations each get $10,000 each that they can spend however they want, and that they largely spend on police outreach, which the communities usually don't want.
Thank you, Hannah. We need you at more village planning committee meetings. Absolutely. We have our last group, Sean.
Hey, that's me. So on the topic of stories and narratives used to provide or prioritize white comfort, we covered a lot of what was covered already, but I think something that was mentioned around media and who's in charge of media and how newspapers and media outlets really reinforce these narratives with terms that they decide to report with. So that was something on that. And then on the other question of how do developers or development follow white movement, a lot of that has been covered as well, but a lot of this gentrification on the south side, the light rail following that development, even though that's been desired for a very long time. And just seeing the increased development because so many people are moving to Arizona in the south side. And that the northeast and west areas of Phoenix are already kind of developed, and they already see a lot of, existing segregation from all the history that you've already shared with us. So someone mentioned living in Levine, and that used to be a very agricultural community, but now they're seeing more development and more expansion. And then a lot of everything else we covered. Oh, a good comment around, or not a good comment, I don't know why I'm judging that, but just a comment around the airport development and what the housing looks like around the airport. So people living close to the airport are typically Black and brown working class people, and they often work at the airport. And then the people who are frequenting the airport tend to be white communities who live farther away from the airport. So it's a kind of an interesting comparison to white movement outside of like where we move in our communities, but moving without the world. So if anyone would like to add their pieces. Oh, sorry, I don't want to leave this one out. It's just around home ownership. Someone was comparing East Mesa to West Mesa. West Mesa being a predominantly Black and brown community, seeing only around 40% home ownership, and then East Mesa is considered a more white community and seeing 60% home ownership, and so that contrast and disparity is pretty obvious.
Thank you so much, April. You reminded me of one of my first jobs at Arizona Shuttle at the airport, Terminal 3. So thank you, everybody. What we want to move into now is kind of the contemporary development era that we're in, that kind of leads to today, and with a specific focus of downtown, right? As revitalization efforts, as we think about how they showed up. The revitalization effort of downtown has been a decades-long endeavor. from a dying downtown to what a lot of folks nationally would call a very successful and vibrant and thriving downtown today. So what I want us to do is close our eyes. If you wouldn't mind closing your eyes. I hope you all have been downtown at some point. And I want us to consider again this question: what if it's true? Development patterns in Phoenix continue to follow white comfort and white safety. What if that's true? So now we're gonna imagine ourselves taking a little stroll through downtown. And we're gonna start ourselves at Central in Washington, a few blocks from City Hall. And we're gonna move northwards to Van Buren in Central, up to Roosevelt. Take a look. What buildings did you see? What landmarks did you notice? Just in that little stretch. What events go on there? Now we're gonna move past Roosevelt in Central to McDowell in Central. And continue on. We're gonna pass Virginia, take a quick look around, what's around you. Continue on to Thomas. And take note of who's there. Who do you see? And as we continue on Central past Thomas, we'll hit Indian School. And as we go past Indian School, we'll end at Camelback. And continue to think through what you saw, what buildings you saw, what memories it triggered, what events were going on, who did you see, what art did you see? And we're gonna go ahead and open our eyes. And what I'm gonna ask you to do is I am gonna go through the priorities of revitalization for downtown that went from decade to decade. And as I name them, as I name this era of revitalization of downtown, if you can put in the chat any buildings, landmarks, neighborhoods, anything you saw in your mind's eye that is related to this era of revitalization of downtown, okay? I'm hoping to see that chat just go. And so we'll go ahead and start. So 1970s and 1980s really sparks revitalization efforts downtown. These efforts, no matter what decade you're in, are always led by the business elite, the most powerful of the powerful. The first effort of 1970s to 1980s were financial districts and institutions. The thought was if we can incentivize financial districts and institutions to come back to our downtown, that will work. In the 1980s and 90s, the thought was, well, that sounds like just work, no play. We're gonna incentivize entertainment districts and sports arenas. And that'll revitalize our downtown. And then in the 1990s to the 2000s, the trend was, you know what's gonna revitalize our downtown? Research universities and medical institutions. That's what will revitalize our downtown. And then finally in the 2000s, we had a switch to arts and culture and the cultivation of the creative class, which is an actual term that was utilized to determine downtown development in the 2000s. And so through the years of financial districts, entertainment districts, research universities, and arts and culture cultivation, you had a revitalization and a resurgence, which included housing.
Typing. You didn't click anything.
Oops. Am I here? Can you hear me okay? Okay. And as we saw at the end of 2010, or leading up to 2010, we have the light rail system. as a means to continue to move people in and out of downtown. Now, I want us to go back to our initial question. And I want us to go back to our initial question. When we think of financial districts, entertainment districts, research universities, and arts and culture, and then all of that with an undergirding of light rail, and we think of the idea of space as already gendered, already racialized, and already subject to alienation. I want to then ask us, and you can add it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, we're going to spend the next about 10 minutes, just an open conversation about who gets alienated and how from the downtown corridor. Who doesn't fit in the model of who downtown gets marketed to? And so how does alienation happen? And again, if you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, you know, we'll go on the honor system if you want to just jump on in. Anybody want to share? Talima?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it a point that Sean had put in the chat, the poor Black youth. And that's exactly who I thought of. I thought of the young people that were on the streets hanging out, where exactly the Native communities, everybody there just kind of going with the murals. Like, that was the first thing that hit me, was that there's a lot of homeless through there, a lot of youth, a lot of Black youth through there, because we've got Central High School too right there, you know. So that high school in particular resonates with me because my brother went there, and it was nuts, you know what I mean? So that to me resonated the most.
Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments or reflection on how alienation happens on racial or gendered lines?
Well, I remember towards the beginning of when we had the art walk in downtown Phoenix, that to begin with, you really didn't even need to get a license. You could just be a part-time artist and set up your little table and get some money and just have fun. And then there was a concentrated effort to exclude people who didn't have the privilege of getting to be a full-time artist. Like, so few people can afford to just be a full-time artist, right? And so I think about that because I really enjoyed the art walk, and not so much once it became more commercialized and only available to people who could afford that time and money expenditure.
Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else want to share? Something they'd like to comment on?
Hey, I just I think within the past few years learned the history around around the Garfield district. Like, Garfield used to, the houses used to go to Central, right? Like, when I think of Garfield as a neighborhood, I think it starts at 7th, right? And everything from Central to 7th is big, it's otherwise developed, except, it's so, vastly different. And what I learned was after the baseball field was developed, they thought that they would develop the football stadium downtown. It ended up being in Glendale, right? But they wanted it to be in downtown. And so, developers went to all of the homeowners in that area, basically trying to manipulate them and coerce them into selling their properties. And so if you didn't already know and didn't already have the inclination to be oh yeah, I'm gonna sell my house in the downtown area and make a buttload of money, down the line. If you didn't have that in your heart and mind, then you were you were not like development savvy. And by that, I mean, that was completely racialized, right? And a lot of the people who ended up like not selling their homes and, you know, are now making however many millions of dollars off of their houses on Fifth Street, right? Are like all white people, as opposed to like a lot of the people who ended up being coerced to sell their houses for like $30,000, $40,000 back in the day, were a lot of like Latino like homeowners. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, something that reminds me of is like there's generations of displacement now that even my own family has gone through as we've moved from Golden Gate, right, Sun City, South Phoenix, even the housing crisis in 2008, like we lost our house. And so like a lot of people did. Anybody else want to chime in there? We got about...
What I was, actually what I was saying with my breakout group was on that topic of what the person was talking about on capitalism, you know, and getting on vulnerable people who may not understand property and development and getting them to sell their homes, you know. I see in my area, you know, they are preying on those people who have been in their homes for years, are probably living paycheck to paycheck, but they own the land. And now that COVID happened, you know, hours are being cut, people are losing jobs, so they're vulnerable. So here comes the real estate guy. Hey, we'll offer you this lump sum of money. And they're like, sure, I'll take these couple, you know, 200,000 when it's worth like $500,000. And so capitalism follows whiteness. You know, that's to answer the question, you know, how like development follows whiteness, capitalism and the way the system is set up follows whiteness. You know, even with the elderly, you know, they're preying on the elderly living in their homes to talk them into getting that property and selling their cow, you know? So yeah, that was a good point. I like that. It's true.
We got time for maybe one more comment. And again, I'm seeing the chat go, so I really appreciate those folks that are adding to that discussion. Anybody else have one more thing that they want to share?
I do. So for especially in downtown and in South Phoenix, we're seeing that who's not branded to and who's not the focus in development processes are families, families of color and students of color. Especially being an educator and those here who are running for school board, is that what our local school districts are dealing with is loss of student population due to gentrification. That's because what is being planned here with the apartments are not financially feasible for families, low-income families to pay, right? So they're being forced out of the area. And with that comes a loss of funding in our local school districts. And so they're suffering on top of the funding that's already lacking at the state level. And in addition to that is public transit. I was a part of the transit oriented development team, and I was compelled to be a part of that because I understood quickly that who was being prioritized and who was at the center of that conversation were businesses, and very much meeting and appealing to their needs and what they needed to thrive. And I understand that, right? But also as a teacher, I understood that this public transit was supposed to be coming here to benefit our families and our students. And if gentrification was gonna happen, which it is, right? That was gonna push them out of the area. So they were not, and being catered to, the student population was not being catered to. And so we needed people really advocating for students and families and the resources that they were going to need when the light rail came, not just businesses.
Thank you, Reggie. You know, I really do appreciate this conversation, especially when I think about, you know, the last 30 years of downtown development and the harm that it has caused. These conversations really do end up wearing on me, and it feels really heavy. And so, you know, if you need to take a breath, feel free to take a breath, because that's definitely how I feel, especially as someone who has experienced displacement in multiple ways. And so what I want to do is just give a little nod to the future, the present and the future. And I want folks to just consider these areas, right? So if white flight was, you know, at the center, it moved outward and then returned to the city center, and is slowly moving outward again, right? Like that's the pattern that we're in right now. And the way that development is happening in the city now, that is like, what's the pattern that is beyond the city center, that is now moving? And that development pattern is looking at business corridors and transit corridors. And I want to name a few because they exist all over the city. But you have the South Central Corridor, right, which is a major corridor of development and investment. You have Miracle Mile, which is from 7th Street to like 16th Street, 19th Street on McDowell, that Miracle Mile corridor. Roosevelt Row is like the crown jewel of corridors if we're talking from capitalist terms. That would be the example that all corridors should be looking at. You have Canyon Corridor, which is that area around 17th Avenue, 35th Avenue, Camelback to GCU. And you have another corridor that's actually pretty looked at is Melrose District. That's another indication. If you're in Estrella Mountain, you have a Future Tech Corridor. You're in Central City South, you have a Warehouse District Corridor. These are the future development sites of priority. That is the way that it's flowing. You can call it following white flight, you can following white comfort, but that is the next priority for development. And if you are looking to get involved as we continue this conversation, those are areas we need to look at. And so that's all to tee up that this was meant to be day one, right, of a 3-part series of resegregation in the city. This kind of gave the overview of how resegregation is happening. Next month, we're gonna do the day will be on resegregation in the city, looking specifically at light rail. And specifically, again, the South Central Corridor. So we will look at that directly. And we'll spend the day kind of looking at those transit corridors. And so thank you everybody for joining us. What I want to do is bring on Paris, because we don't want to just leave you with like, development decision-making. We feel so powerless and helpless. We are building power. We are looking to build this movement to put people over property. And one of those fronts is our local village planning committees. And so Paris, if you want to come in and do our first little call to action for folks as we continue to wait to see each other till next month.
Sure, thank you. So if you were in my group, I introduced myself, Paris, she, her pronouns. I am a member of the Estrella Village Planning Committee, and I'm also the director of Black Phoenix Organizing Collective. Now, there are a couple of Village Planning Committee members on this call as well. We want to invite you to join one of the calls, listen, see what's happening. Because in that space, that's where the decisions get made around what's gonna happen in your community, right? We asked you to look up the village that you're from. And so now that you know the village that you are from, all the meetings are different times on different days. Ours was last night, right? So you get to hear in the space in real time the developers, the institutions that want to come and build in your neighborhood. And you can speak, public comment is available. You can shut it down, right? And so I want to invite you all to attend your next, I think the ones for this month are all done. Next month, they will happen. I want all of you to just log in, because they're on Zoom, or, you know, and feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn more about it, if you want to join through listening, and then we can work you up to actually join one of the committees. But yeah, it's really interesting, and you have input. You actually have input in what happens in your village. I think that's all I got. You want me to say more?
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Paris. Appreciate it. If you contact Paris, we will definitely show you how to look up your village and look up when the next meeting is. If you are planning to go, please make some time to stretch before and after. Those meetings are tough when you're talking about development and it is all about property and you can't even understand where the human and the people get to enter the conversation.
They don't even mention communities at all. So it is very like taxing on you emotionally. It's borderline grotesque because they don't talk about us as humans, as community members.
Right, and so be prepared, right? But this is part of the reason why we're trying to build a community around this conversation and continue to hold each other. Also remember, resegregation, it forces race into the conversation. And that is the first thing that gets invisibilized. Nobody wants to talk about race in association to development, and yet it drives everything. And so if there's any line to hold, that would be one. And hopefully today helped do that. And hopefully this series of resegregation in the city will continue to help us do that and name how race is operating in the development process. Lastly, Sean, we have one more call to action before we go.
Yes.
Sean from MassLib, thank you.
Yes. Hey, everyone. So I think I've introduced myself a couple of times, but again, my name is Sean. I'm with MassLib. So if you would like to get more involved, we really highly encourage you to follow MassLib on social media. Here are our 3 social medias right here. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have a website. And our email is at the bottom here. And you can also donate to us through our website or through this bit.ly link that's on the screen. I'm going to also put the donation link in the chat. So if for some reason you don't get to grab it off the screen, it's in the chat and you can click it right there. We have an event coming up soon called Let's Talk Abolition. It's coming on Wednesday, the 29th at 6 p.m. Very similar to this event. And it's going to be a discussion, a community dialogue about what abolition is, and also offer you all more ways to be involved in this movement. So yeah, I'm gonna put the link one more time to donate if you can, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. Before we go, if you all want to stick around, you don't have to, but that amazing video that we started with at the beginning, we realized was not actually the final version. You saw a draft version. And it's so good. And MassLib folks and Ria did such amazing work on it. And so thank you all for joining us. It's about a 2-minute video that we were going to show at the beginning and the front end. If you would like to stay for it, please stay for it. But otherwise, we'll see you next month. Please know that there will be an early registration. So if you were here today, we will early register because we are going to continue to cap it at 100 people so we can keep quality small group discussion and dialogue as part of this series. So register early. And with that, we'll go ahead and see the video and we'll see you in a month. Thank you, Ria.
Black Liberation Arizona presents Resegregation in the City. In a 2018 segment on KJZZ discussing how rare it is to be an Arizona native, 60% of residents in 2017 were reported to have been born out of state according to the American Community Survey. This makes Arizona a top 5 commuter state following Nevada, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Where are most people moving from? According to the U.S. Census, California. And while this pattern of migration to the Phoenix metropolitan area makes sense when you consider that the Valley has long been considered one of the most affordable places to live in the West, a steadily rising gap between income and housing rates has set off alarms about what affordability really means for its residents. Cheap housing has disappeared, replaced by high-priced rentals that don't seem to fit into the landscape. In a 2019 article from the Arizona Republic on the looming affordable housing crisis, the median home price in Phoenix was reported to have grown by 44% since 2013, while the median household income only increased by 12%. And the result of this disparity in income and housing rates? Maricopa County Justice Courts saw more than 25,000 eviction orders in 2017 alone, the fifth highest total in county history, and a 12% increase from 2016. Nowhere was the increase worse than in the Country Meadows Justice Precinct, which spreads across high-poverty chunks of Glendale and West Phoenix. When rents reach the tipping point, when old industrial buildings flip or are razed for flimsy new ones made of glass and chipboard, when the once affordable housing is renovated into high-end duplexes, when poor residents have to leave, the gentrification narrative hits its limit. Gentrification has no room for the question, where did the displaced go? Resegregation tells a more complete story by addressing race and answering where the evicted, the foreclosed, the unwelcomed, where the displaced go. As the inner city gentrifies, poor Black and brown people are relegated to the inner and outer suburbs, like Levine, Buckeye, and Maricopa. They face premature death through homelessness, health disparities, and police violence. And they are caged in prisons, jails, and detention centers.
That's it.
Friends, we have some work to do.
That was it?
To do.
Like that, oh my God, like I was so ready for this to be a documentary. Like, stop.
It's
like,
to be continued.
This needs to be our next work. Like, this needs to be added to our work. We need filmmakers. We need to start like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, I'm so happy for you guys. That's bomb, Joe. That's so bomb. I'm sorry, y'all. I know I'm interrupting, but that's bomb. That's bomb.
Thank Rhea. That was so much of Rhea's talent. And again, if you all are gonna be able to continue to donate so we can pay folks to do this work and tell this story, that would be super helpful. But thank everyone for sharing in this work. We have so much left to do, as you can see, and ideally this is just the beginning. It's not a moment, this is a movement. So we will see you next week or next month. Oh,
do you have your link so we can donate? Is your link in the chat?
Yep.
Yeah.
I just put in the chat again. So.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Peace.
Halima, you are so funny. All right, how are you feeling? How are we feeling?
That was awesome. Oh my gosh, that was so awesome.
Finished so nicely. 801.
Yeah.
801. Wow. Yes.
Wow.
I wasn't certain after those two run through. I was not certain. How did folks feel about their breakouts?
Mine went really well. My first one was a little slow because I had that technical difficulty, but the next two, my group was very, I wouldn't say very talkative, but there was a lot of participation.
Yeah,
I would say that.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they were pretty active, which was good. You know, I noticed the chat was going really well. You know, folks were engaging each other in the chat, which was awesome. Yeah, it went really, really well.
Cool. Yeah, my groups went well too. Yeah, there was a lot of participation. And well, one thing, like, I don't know, it didn't even occur to me. Good call that Jamar was in my group for a few minutes, like, do intros. I don't know, we didn't do intros in my first breakout. We just jumped right into discussion. It just, I don't, well, because like, when I'm in Zoom, I'm in classroom mode, and it's like, well, everybody, so it just didn't even like pop in my head that, yeah, we should probably introduce each other. So that was a misstep on my part, but otherwise, I mean, but yeah, discussions went really well though.
Jamar, Ria, any thoughts, feedback? And Sean?
It was exciting to see everyone like really pumped to be talking about the issues. I'm glad, you know, it really, y'all put together a good mix of like educational material, discussion questions, and like prompts for further thought. That was dope. Everyone responded really well to it. So well done. That was really cool.
Anything that we could improve on, do better, top lines?
Technical stuff, we need an extra person to be doing that. Also, I think we should have met at like 5 like 5 o'clock if we could have, just to go over things again and like smooth things out. But I'm also just paranoid. Like, I just felt like half an hour wasn't enough.
Yeah, I hear that. Maybe like 5:15, even that extra 15 minutes could help. And yeah, it would be nice to have just one more person on technical stuff. Because I feel like Ria's doing a lot, and then I kind of picked up whatever Ria didn't have.
Thank you so much for your help. You saved me.
Yeah, you know, and that's the thing is like I feel like even though one more person would have made it just, you know, smooth sailing. Like we made it work, but you know, it could be smoother, it could be tighter.
I think one of the things that I would like to see happen is I don't think one person should hold so much of the meeting. And so how do we share more of the facilitation piece? Like, especially when it's like the whole group. I know we did it this time around because I was trying to test some stuff out and get a lot of information out of my brain. But that's definitely something I would like to see happen and us move toward. Anything else in terms of things that we could improve on? Alrighty, any parting thoughts? Last thoughts before we close? Final thoughts, we're gonna go around anyway.
I'll go first. Thank you, Joe, for putting this together and leading it. Thank you, Ria, for all of your hard work in the video and holding down the Zoom meeting. And thank you to all the facilitators for being here and working with us. I felt really honored to be a part of this project and to just learn alongside y'all. And I feel like this, for me being like a new staff member, this is like kind of, I think, one of the first Mass Lib events I've like really like been at as a Mass Lib staff member. So this was like an awesome first experience. Like I couldn't really ask for anything else. So I want to say thank you to you all.
You want to pass the floor, Sean?
Oh, my bad. How about Matthew?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I want to thank, you know, Ria for her continued hard work and an amazing, you know, artwork that you do. You know, Sean, thank you for all your hard work as well. And as always, Joe, for organizing everything. I love seeing this conversation, you know, grow. You know, it's things that Joe and I would talk about at Azúcar like a couple of years ago, just to each other. Now having 50 people all part of that conversational, part of that dialogue, I think is a great thing. And I'm really excited to see that continued growth and moving forward of this conversation. So a big thanks to everybody for being involved. And I'm going to pass it to Ria.
Sorry, I'm eating something. What was the question again? It was like your feeling and like what you thought. Okay. I'm
final
feeling.
thought.
Okay, final thought. Yeah, final thought. I just think this is such a great like curriculum to build on, and I'm so happy to see how enthusiastic people were at this first shot. You know, like even, you know, like I just don't think like usually like this type of conversation or this type of topic is like, it doesn't move beyond the idea of like kind of, you know, oh, it's gentrification or, you know, whatever. Like people don't see like the exact, like the entirety of like this, of like what's happening, you know, and they don't connect those dots necessarily unless they have like a lot of like access to that type of information, either as like person who lives here and who's noticing things, or like as someone maybe in like academia or like, you know, land development or something like that, right? So I think this is a great thing to open up for like, as like a community conversation. And I think today proved that it was a dialogue that people wanted to partake in, and it got people thinking. So I'm really happy to see that. Yeah, and thank you, Joe, for it was really great working with you for like, I don't know how many hours that was, but like the past like weekend to this today. And I'll pass to Rachel.
Thanks, Ria. Yeah, I mean, just such an amazing event, like so much great information. I learned so much. Yeah, you did such like an amazing job, you know, leading the event, Joe, and putting this together. Yeah, and it was so well balanced too. I feel like now going through it, I don't think it was like too much information. It was a lot, but it was like I feel like it was just perfect. And yeah, Ria, all of your slides in the video, like just so so amazing. Yeah, I cannot fathom how many hours you all worked on to put this together. And yeah, and like, yeah, and it's just great working with everyone. And yeah, and I'm also feel very honored to be working with all you, and yeah, and Sean and Matthew and Jamar with facilitating and stuff. And yeah, I think that's it. So then I will pass to Jamar.
I feel like it felt real galvanizing, to be honest with you. People were engaged and excited on the issue, and like, you know, when we're in these VPCs, it can often feel like we're alone, especially in my VPC. Like, you know, I'm still trying to find like strong allies, and you know, I see the NIMBY people in there all the time. Like they've organized like strong opposition to all the shit. When they don't want it, but then strong support when they do. And it's like me being the only voice sometimes fighting back, but like people wanting to support me, but not being willing to like say it in the meetings. But having everyone on a call like this is really supportive, because everyone seems really excited about the ideas and really took to the educational material. So I feel like this is a great jump off to start talking about the ways in which, you know, we fight back and we actually implement solutions or we implement, you know, opposition that can get us to the next level. You know, the thing that's still a little fuzzy for me, and still stuff that I have to catch up on, is it takes a lot of educational time to learn their language and to learn like the mechanisms by which you can push them. So that is something that I think is always going to be a need for organizing in this space.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Did you have anything else? Yeah, I think that is something that we're continuing to try and do. So the spillover property is really broken down into two pieces. One is the VPC members, some on this call, right? We've been organizing as we are representatives of the Village Planning Committee, and I think that's where we can continue to do some of that work, Jamar. We do have a meeting scheduled for VPC members, right, as part of People Over Property. And I think that the idea is that in the last session, right, so this is a 3-part series. And in the third series, the third part is when we want to get to resegregation in planning and zoning. So if it's like resegregation in the city, and then it's resegregation in light rail, and now it's resegregation in planning and zoning, by that third one, we really want to get into that piece that you're talking about, Jamar. And ideally, as we continue to discuss and converse as Village Planning Committee members, we can build, like, what does that day need to look like? What are the things we need to bring forward in that conversation in the third part of this series? That thought has me also wanting to mention that so I don't know who had Dominic in your room. Do you remember who had Dominic? So Dominic used to work for LISC and is someone who tends to work in the world of granting and grant dollars. And he loves this work. He loves my work. He loves this work. He's a cool dude. But there's a number of funders who want to give money to this project. And I am asking for $10K for just this piece, which is the resegregation piece. And I would really like to work with you all as like a team on content creation and curriculum build. Sean's on loan as like a MassLib employee. That's like where his funding is coming from. But for the rest of you, like, I do recognize the work that's put into this, and there's 2 more sessions. And I would really like to work with you all on some kind of like stipend basis to help build the curriculum for this and the agendas for the next 2. If that's something y'all are interested in, I think it's like, honestly, I think it's like 5 hours of work between now, like 5 hours for each agenda. So we have 2 more sessions. I would say the request outside of the actual meeting itself, it's about 5 hours of work. And then that would be undergirded and supported by like MassLib staff. Is that something that you all would be interested in? Do you think you need more hours as well as the other question? Should we look at 10 hours? Because that would be my actual ideal, but I don't want to like, right. So that would be my last question before we get off. Is that something y'all would be interested in? And it would be $75 an hour because that's like what we can afford. And that's if we get this money, which I'm like 90% sure we are. So Rachel, you're down. Matt and we had this conversation. Jamar, is that something you mean? I know you're busy, so I'm cool if it's like, hey, I can't.
I mean, if it's after the 4th, then I'll be in a better position. Well, maybe after the November.
Okay.
I won't be the best participant from now until November.
That is fair. That is totally fair. We're gonna continue to invite you, Jamar, but I'm probably not gonna pay you.
I definitely don't want to be paid. That's for sure.
Oh goodness, I do want to pay you all for your time and your effort.
And don't pay me either. No.
Oh goodness, I am. We'll continue to talk about this. I'm gonna send the schedule out for some planning sessions for the next one. But I really am thankful to you all for like making this happen with me. And so it's been a fun ride so far, and it does seem like people really want more of this. So cool. That makes me really happy. And I really do think like the conversations as I heard them and as I popped in were fantastic. And so thank you all. I do think it's in part to your work as facilitators, which I do find really valuable as a facilitator. All right, friends. Well, that's all I got. We will see you next time. Look for that schedule. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Have a
Bye.
good night.